Super Stonk Brothers, episode number 13. Today we're going to be talking about a company we've actually gotten quite a few requests about, and that is Roblox. At least as of today, Kids Creative Sandbox platform company that went public earlier this year on March 12th, opening with a share price of $69.50 at the end of that opening day. The company is traded as high as $99.86 per share, but as of the current share price, it sits at $81.14, which is about a little over $46 billion in market cap. And so in our discussion today, we'll be talking about first, current business and valuation. Second, growth drivers. Three, the metaverse, which is something Roblox has been talking a lot about. Fourth, key risks. And finally, we will conclude with opinions on future prospects. So today on the pod with us, we have myself, Macro108, regular co-host Steve Pally, and becoming a fairly regular guest host, we have Matthew Konterman from Bloomberg Intelligence. Welcome once again, Matthew.
Thanks for having me. Lucky number 13. And happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, since we're recording on Father's Day.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm. And so maybe just going ahead and kicking it off in terms of the current business and valuation, maybe we could start there. And I know, Matthew, you've written a couple of reports on Roblox specifically. So maybe you could kick it off with kind of your high-level thoughts in terms of Roblox's current business, as well as where they sit from a valuation perspective.
Sure. So Roblox is a gaming platform. Well, we can discuss if it's a game or if it's actually a platform. That ties into the valuation discussion. But creators, developers can build experiences using the tools built by Roblox to build gaming experiences, just places to hang out in a 3D virtual world, whatever it may be, similar style to Minecraft. They have thousands upon thousands of developers now building experiences on the platform, but it still continues to be that the largest 10 or so experiences still account for the bulk of the engagement. So not too dissimilar to like the games industry overall. They've grown tremendously during COVID. They've been probably one of the biggest beneficiaries in the gaming space during the pandemic. Their DAUs have absolutely just gone postal, and so has the total hours spent on the platform. It's clear that people flock, mostly kids flock to Roblox as a means to socialize with their friends when they were physically distant. And so I mentioned kids. That's one of the big things, is that the age range of the user base tends to skew a lot younger than traditional gaming companies. And on the valuation side, the big question, which we can dive into, is this a games company, and should it be valued like all of its gaming peers, Activision, EA, Take-Two, etc., or is this a internet platform for the next iteration of social networks? And that's kind of the debate right now around the valuation, given it's trading more like the latter and less like the former.
Right. And very recently, Roblox traded off. I think we had discussed a little bit earlier, it may have been because of the main numbers. And let's maybe discuss that. So I guess on a year-on-year basis, Roblox has been doing pretty well. So just to cite some numbers for our audience, daily active users were 43 million, up 28% from May of last year, but down 1% from 43.3 million in April. So hours engaged were 3.2 billion, up 9% year over year, and up 1% from 3.2 billion in April 2021. So that was a little bit up. But I think also average bookings per DAO, which were estimated to be between $5.02 and $5.09, down 2 to 3% year over year. And so what do you think? When you look at the numbers, obviously from COVID, there was a huge spike last year, like everything rose dramatically as per your comments, Matthew, but then it does seem like things are starting to level off. And now between April and May, we've seen a little bit of a decline. Do we think that this is a bigger trend, or do you think this is just more of a seasonality type of issue?
May was definitely a bit weaker than expected. There is seasonality in May, right? If you think about it, March is seasonally strong because of the Easter holidays and Passover. April is seasonally strong because of spring break. You got to put your head on a school calendar to think about the Roblox seasonal strengths, right? And then May, there's really no big holidays except for Labor Day at the very end of the month, but that's only one day off from school, right? And so I'm sorry, Memorial Day, not Labor Day. And so, May is seasonally down a little bit historically. So it's not surprising to see things sequentially down. But obviously, when you're a high growth, not an IPO direct listing, but when you're a high growth new issue, extreme expectations built into the valuation, people aren't going to want to see sequential down numbers, and
Right.
that spooked people a little bit. I think June is going to be more important for sentiment for the stock, just because June is seasonally a stronger month. That's when school gets out. So if we continue to see sequential slowdown in June, then we really need to start worrying about, okay, April really was the peak. Numbers are going to normalize a lot lower in the second half of the year. If you look at Roblox's guidance, which is still below consensus, but if you kind of look at what's baked into the numbers right now, people are expecting a slowdown in the second half. It's just the degree to how big that slowdown is and how much the market is willing to stomach a slowdown in growth. Because, Eric Kress has said this with you guys before, with on Twig, all the other podcasts, right? New IPOs that are posting negative growth tend to not do well,
Right.
no matter how well it's expected.
Right. And I think maybe one other thing to note in terms of progress for Roblox has been the developer community. And so, note here was that the number of developers earning over $30,000 was nearly 800, or approximately two times the trailing 12-month number measured at the end of Q1 2020. So that's a good improvement year over year. And similarly, the run rate of earnings for the 1,000th developer was over 29,000 in March 2021, up from roughly 8,000 March last year. So good
That's a
news
big
in
deal.
terms of earnings for third-party developers. And I think I have been hearing that there are some bigger, more professional developers starting to jump onto Roblox, but it still seems very early. There isn't a huge wave of those bigger teams yet.
It's still smaller teams. It's still people that grew up with Roblox,
Mhm.
but it's no longer 12-year-old kids. That's not the exclusive developer base now. There are more professionalized developer teams out there with teams of developers. They may not be as professional as a AAA studio, but they have a dozen, 2 dozen employees. Or, I know, Joe, you spoke with a few on a podcast you
Right,
did. They had a team of 6, a team of 8, whatever it may be. So it's definitely moving in that direction. And I think over time, especially as the engagement continues to concentrate on larger experiences, those bigger teams that are successful can keep growing because they're going to continue to get more and more of a share of the engagement. And we can talk about how Roblox is shifting monetization, but the monetization that they're paying out to developers is going to be driven by engagement in experiences and less so just on item purchases. And so based on that, it's going to reward these more successful experiences that attract more of the engagement.
right,
Yeah. On top of that, Roblox now runs its own DSP inside of its platform, right? And that is naturally going to lead to concentration because you get the positive feedback effect of making money and then investing money in more eyeballs within the platform. So
right.
you can advertise. And I think that will also catalyze larger developers coming onto the platform because they'll see an entry point where they can actually do marketing
Yeah, and
very
Steve,
effectively.
I think that's a good point you raised, because when Roblox talks about the construction of their business or how it's comprised, they talk about the client, right? Which is
Hmm.
the client side application that enables players to explore the 3D worlds within Roblox. Roblox Studio, which is a tool set where it's kind of like the Unity or the Unreal Engine that allows you to build the experience, what they're now calling experiences, and we can talk about that as well inside of
Uh-huh.
Roblox.
Interesting pivot. Yeah.
Yeah, and Roblox Cloud, which includes, all the backend stuff. And actually cloud is a part that I think is really the big factor behind a lot of the younger developers jumping onto Roblox, right? Like as a as a single or young developer, basically, and this is a conversation having spoken to a lot of these developers, that vector from idea to having something running and having your game is so much smaller when you can compress not only having to learn like the tools, but all the back end services, the
Yeah.
multiplayer netcode, all the Amazon AWS storage and all that junk, all that stuff is just completely, taken care of by Roblox. And so that's certainly one of the reasons why I think that they have and will continue to have a deathlock on that earlier segment of the developer audience.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think in some ways it's the next iteration of what Apple and Google did with their app stores, right?
Right.
In the sense that they solved security and they solved monetization for the people on their platform, and Roblox has taken that much further with integrated social, integrated virtual items, and all other types of live ops that are now really important. The scrubbing of hate speech, stuff like that, right? You need that stuff in order to really operate like a persistent multiplayer game at this point. And they are among the best at providing a venue for that.
Right. And
It's not to say that,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, it's not to say that Unity and others don't have these tools. It's just, to your point, it's just easily integrated with Unity. Everything's an API, and you have to know how to link those things together and code it.
Right.
Azure has PlayFab now running on it, which is a lot of the same
Mm-hmm.
backend tool sets, but they don't have an engine, but so you still have to link it together with APIs. So just having everything, as you said, you don't have to worry about it. It's night and day for up and coming developers.
It's a huge deal. You need specialists in live ops in order to be able to do live ops like effectively, and to have that just taken off of your hands is just it's a big load off.
Yeah. But I do think the way that a lot of people should be thinking about Roblox as a development platform is that this notion of reducing that development vector, right? From having what kind of person can make a game? How big of a team do you need? And so it compresses the team and compresses the technical savvy and capability you need in order to have going from idea to having something that runs that other people can play. But also maybe speaking to this terminology issue. So like Roblox has seemed intentionally dramatically shifted from calling, games in their platform games to experiences. But I think one thought is it's because of pressure from Apple, and Apple having some kind of terminology issue with them calling things games. But we also see that it also aligns with them talking more about the metaverse. And I know, Matthew, in your research report, you talked about the opportunity of defining the metaverse as more of a shared experience, right? And so in that context, it kind of aligns against both of those things. But I don't know if you guys have any other additional insights on what they're thinking or what the motivation behind shifting from
It's
games
not
to experiences is.
It's not just talk from them, right? Because they have had lots of successful non-gaming experiences. They did the Lil Nas X concert, which was successful. That followed Fortnite doing a couple concerts like Marshmello. So that's not gaming, right? They did something with Gucci. I don't know if you saw this, but there was a Gucci store that was basically built in Roblox, and there was a limited edition, one of a kind cosmetic item that they sold. It was a Gucci handbag that sold for the equivalent of $4,000 US in Robux. That's more money than an actual Gucci bag would cost you in real life.
Yeah,
which you could then resell for more money, because the secondary market for these handbags is ridiculous. But somebody paid more money for a fake one inside of Roblox. So, there's clearly a lot more to Roblox now than just gaming experiences. And so I think that change in nomenclature actually makes sense given where they are. They've also talked about expanding into education, which I think could make sense, particularly with the age base of the user base, the age range of the user base. And then also, over time, as the core users age, if they can stick with the platform, which that's a big risk we can talk about, but if they can stick, then can Roblox actually become an enterprise, collaboration tool? Can it be the next iteration of Zoom? And that's actually something they've talked about also.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how much Roblox you guys have experienced yourselves. I started playing it last year with my 3-year-old son. And what I can tell you is that experience is actually just a more accurate term for what's going on there than game in most cases. Because games are supposed to have rule sets and objectives. And that's really not most of what's happening in these things, right? It's you're in this world, you're running around, you're crashing vehicles, you're running into people and doing stuff with them. And it's very casual and it's very free form. It's very sandbox, right? And yes, they have designed experiences, constructed experiences on there. They have formal MMOs with objectives where you're supposed to be doing stuff. But like a large volume of it is just completely free form, and you hop in and out of these experiences, and it's like it's like entertainment tourism, right? They're like more or less completely fungible, and you just consume them, right? Until you hit one and you stick, and then once you stick, you're basically in this MMO that you're paying the developer for, and therefore Roblox, right? And if you play multiple of those, then you're a power user for Roblox. But until then, you're kind of like, yeah, you're traipsing through the multiverse. Like, I think that's not an unreasonable way of describing what they're doing at all. And yeah, depending on how long they can, they're public now, they're well established, hopefully still growing. By the way, quick proviso, I'm long Roblox. But yeah, if they can hang around for another couple decades, it's like there's gonna be a lot of adults hanging out on Roblox. And what do adults do? They do work, right? So makes sense.
I think it's also important to point out, just because there's a lot of hype around the metaverse shared experiences today, it's not like this is new for Roblox. They've been building this, when the prior iterations before the company was called Roblox, started, I think, 16 years
2004.
ago. Yeah, 16 years ago, 17 years ago now. So almost 2 decades, Dave and the team have been building towards this goal. So for a lot of people, they're just today talking about the metaverse. Steve, I know your employer has talked about virtual theme parks in some of their conference calls. Lots of various ways of talking about these shared experiences. But I really think that among a lot of these companies, Roblox has been doing it the longest and really been building purpose built for this, not trying to find ways to take what they have and make it and elevate it to a shared experience.
Yeah, it's definitely an overnight success, 17 years in the making, right?
Yes, exactly.
They've been around for a long time.
So maybe we could talk about the valuation then, given the current business. And Matthew, I know you've done some analysis in terms of some of the comparables, but do you want to speak to that in terms of valuation?
Yeah, I mean, what it really comes down to, and I mentioned it in the intro, is do you think that Roblox is a games company, or do you think that Roblox is a next iteration of social media platform? If you think it's the former, you can pretty much argue that by all metrics, the stock is overvalued because all of its peer gaming companies trade, even Activision, which is kind of like the high end of the range, trades at a forward to sale EV to sales ratio of 7.7 times and forward EV to EBITDA of 16.5 times. Roblox fetches about 20 times EV to sales and about 90 times EV to EBITDA. So by most metrics, when you compare it to like even one of the best companies in gaming, it's overvalued. But if you believe that Roblox is a future platform, which I really do, I really think there's something to what they're building. And we can talk about some other moves that have happened in the industry that kind of verify that. But then you're looking at internet companies like Facebook and others, or even if you just look at Unity, because we talked about how similar the core software stack is to what Unity's building. Unity trades at about 20 times EV to sales. It has negative EBITDA, so that doesn't make sense to compare. But, so it trades closer to Unity, closer to design software companies, closer to these large internet platforms. And so if you really believe that that is where Roblox is, and that's the future for Roblox, then the valuation actually is fairly defensible, so long as they can defend this leadership in the nascent development of the metaverse.
Right. And then maybe then speaking to, given that growth seems to have slowed, at least in May. Now, speaking more medium to long term, it would seem to me then that if we think about growth drivers, how's Roblox going to continue to grow? There's kind of 3 axes of growth. First is demographics, right? Like right now, they're completely focused on kids. How do they get an audience over 13? Second would be geography. And I think very critical to geography would probably be China in particular. And then maybe we can also separately talk about metaverse. But speaking on demographics, I think that based upon, I think was it in their 8K, they did mention some growth in the over 13 segment. That seemed pretty high. But I don't know, just like conceptually to me, it doesn't seem to make sense, because when I look at their current content library and like the current experiences, I don't personally see anything that would seem to appeal to folks who are over 13. So it could just be that segment grew, but it grew from a very small base. But I don't know. What do you guys? I personally, this is one area where I think they are going to be highly challenged. This is the area where it's like almost metaverse or bust. Like if they continue down with the current platform, that sure they'll continue to be able to get these younger developers that have an eye for what younger kids want, that can create these easy to build games. But then for the deeper, more engaging games that generally tend to appeal to an older audience, I'm skeptical on the demographic growth as far as over 13. What do you guys think?
So I mean, if you dig into the numbers, if you look at kind of the bulk of that over 13 is in the 13 to 16 category, so it's not really
Okay.
that far
Yeah.
over
Right.
13, but growing fastest in
Right.
that cohort amongst the cohorts is actually 17 to 21, so kind of college age. Kids is actually the fastest growing. It's a smaller base, but it's growing a lot faster. So that's something to watch. So it's
Right.
clear that they've had some success with college age. It's not just, middle school, high school kids anymore. Part of that could simply be they played it and now they're just aging out and sticking with it. So that's something to watch, I think, is, that's a big risk, right? Is as players get older and as they go from having, much more limited number of gaming experiences because their parents won't buy them Halo to now having, being able to buy whatever they want, and having all these other options, will they stick with Roblox? I also think from the platform perspective, they've started enabling more advanced 3D graphics. There's some experiences that are out there that take advantage of that, some racing games, tower defense games, things, as Steve mentioned, that are kind of more in the mid to hardcore areas and that really resemble games. And so I think they're going to need more of that as well to truly, capture those older audiences who are more used to that. Like there's like a knockoff CS:GO that I was playing on Roblox effectively, but it's like the blocky art style that you're used to, like with Minecraft and Roblox. And so it's just kind of like, why would I play this instead of just going and playing CS:GO? Because they're both free and there's a lot more people playing CS:GO.
Right.
But I think there's dedicated efforts to expanding the content, and that should help, theoretically capture some more of those older users. But that's probably the biggest risk to the growth going forwards.
Right.
Yeah, I'm gonna
And
posit
oh,
something that might sound a little weird, and it's simply that I don't think people of our vintage necessarily, and Matthew, you're of a different vintage than myself and Macro over here, really understand the sensibilities of the generation that are really active on Roblox, whereby there's like this sort of anti-aesthetic thing going on, and uh, we think that stuff looks and plays like crap, frankly, but they're into it. They actually really like it. And if you look at how this demographic is marketed to, it is radically different than anything that you or I would consider appealing or, wanting to play or wanting to consume, right? And it's kind of a cop out for me to like come in and just say, "Oh, like we don't get it and we're not going to get it." But I think there is a certain element of that, whereby it's just like, "Okay, boomer." Like, not that I'm a boomer. I'm an elder millennial or a geriatric millennial. That's what it's called now. But like we're talking about Generation Z and beyond, right? I don't even know what the generations are that are active, on this
Full
platform.
disclosure, who thought Fortnite was stupid the first time they saw it? Because I, I
100%.
I totally thought Fortnite made no sense the first time I saw
It's
it.
like I don't want to play this. This sucks. Yeah, this looks like crap. Plays like
well,
crap. Exactly. Yeah, but it's like they love that stuff. They're super
Exactly.
into it. And another thing I'll say is anecdotally, I know a couple teenagers who are really into Roblox, and I asked them why they're really into Roblox, and they're like, "We're making a ton of money swapping items. Like this is a real thing, right? It's the convergence of like digital scarcity with the metaverse, right? And you know, Roblox obviously isn't built on an NFT platform. The stuff is not fungible outside of Roblox. But if you look at the size of Roblox, it has its own gravity, right? We're talking about 43 million DAO, and that is competitive with like the smaller social networks. It's a big deal, right? So that's sufficient market size to actually accrue value with these collectibles, and that's what's happening. So that's another
yeah.
thing to consider.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm still going to be skeptical. Maybe I'm just too old, but I also think like my hypothesis also is that growth that we're seeing in like the, let's say 16 to 25 age segment isn't necessarily players. I think it's people who are saying, "Oh, wait a minute, you can make a ton of money on Roblox. Let me see if I can try and build something." Because at least talking to some of the folks that I have at Roblox or formerly at Roblox, that's kind of the phenomenon that they describe to me is that the players will come in, play until they're about 16, and then slowly transition over to becoming a developer. And then they become developers and then just kind of age out. But not to say that they can't come up with, you know, more age appropriate content for an older audience, but at least in my opinion, it's not there yet. And I think to get there, they would have to build more tools and more graphical capability than they currently have. And from what I understand, they've been working on that for the past 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Just word on the street is that they've been working on it. We're also working on other languages besides Lua from a development perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of my take on it.
It's definitely
It would.
not as feature rich as Unity or Unreal, but to the prior points we were making, the time to market is so much faster. And this is kind of also one of the risks that I've talked about in the past is as you become so successful on the Roblox platform, um, at some point, what's the trade-off on the ROI that you're making to move from Roblox and actually get a Unity license or an Unreal license and start making games for real? Because the share of dollar, the economics that Roblox takes is pretty aggressive relative to just putting,
Very
the
aggressive.
30% that Apple or Google are going to take, or the other gaming app stores on PC and console, right? You're only getting about 30%, 20 to 30% paid out to you on Roblox right now, and that's in Robux. You then have to cash that out to dollars, where there's also a tax on cashing out.
Yeah.
So it beg there at some point there's a trade-off in value for these developers to become more professionalized.
That is true, but at the same time, like Roblox is such an effective aggregator of demand, right? If you're going to recreate what you've got going on Roblox outside of Roblox, that's a high hurdle, right? Because you got to figure out marketing, you got to figure out all that stuff and rebuild your audience. And I don't know that anybody's really tried to do a Pied Piper out of Roblox that I've seen, that I'm aware of, right? So I think that's a pretty good sign for them. But it's early days on the other hand.
So in terms of then kind of moving to the second axis of growth, which is geography, and it seems like, just looking at some of their numbers here, 70% of revenue in 2020 came from the US and Canada. And at 2021, 68% so far. And so thinking about it does feel like the biggest thing here is going to be China, just because China monetizes like a mofo and they've got a huge market, right? So I don't know, Matthew, have you looked at that aspect of their growth and what the potential for, competition, for all the legal barriers and all that other stuff from China? What kind of impact and what kind of growth opportunities you think there is for China for Roblox?
Yeah, I mean, the China opportunity is huge, but it's also maybe zero, and we don't really know. And let me just give some historical context, right? Minecraft is probably the closest thing to Roblox that's ever existed before
Mm-hmm.
Roblox, right? Minecraft
Yeah.
has over 400 million registered users downloads in China with NetEase. It basically has no revenue. So clearly there was hype around Minecraft because it was popular globally, but I think, excuse me, but I think it suffered from a lack of really local content. UGC, which is a huge part of these types of platforms, is a lot more restricted in China than it is in other parts of the world. And so I think that was a big issue for Minecraft. When we start thinking about, where does Roblox fit in? Well, they have a partnership with Tencent, which is fully consolidated on Roblox's financial statements. If you were curious how it affects the fundamentals. But Tencent does a lot of the UA. They do a lot of the recruitment and publishing and government liaison, and Roblox does a lot of the back end work that they've done to build the platform. I think the thing that Roblox is doing correctly is, although it actually launched in China, like it's a secret, it wasn't supposed to get out. Really, what they're doing is they are trying to build a developer base in China and have a sufficient number of large, well known, respected experiences so that when they start pressing the UA pedal, which from what I understand, you know, there's a lot of interest in doing that from both sides. But you know, when they really start pressing the UA pedal, there's actually stuff there for people to engage with. It's not an empty platform that they have to build from scratch. And so I think that's where we're at right now. And so I think they're going about it the right way. As you mentioned, China's huge. It's the largest gaming market in the world, both by number of players and by dollars. Um, you know, some numbers I like to talk about with China just because it kind of puts in perspective how crazy Chinese gamers are. If you look at the spending on games as a percentage of per capita income, GDP per capita, China's at about 0.64% in 2020. That's almost double the US, 0.39%, you know, and double mostly the global average. So the Chinese spend a lot more of their respective incomes on games, and there's a lot more people
Right.
playing games there. So I think all in, you know, it's just such a huge opportunity. But as we sit here, it's just kind of like it's wait and see mode and just see if they can really build up the local developer base.
Got it. Do you know?
Yeah, and just to oh, go
Do
ahead,
you know
Steve.
if they're paying developers to develop right now? I guess they must be, right, to kind of prime the pump.
I think there's some incentives to prime the pump, but I mean, if you also look at has the platform existed before, there was actually people building experiences in Chinese language, like in Taiwan and other parts of the
Mm,
world already. And so they're working with them potentially to bring those experiences to China because they're already built in Chinese language. I think there was also some teams actually in mainland China already developing for the global world, you know, and so working with them as well. So I think there's already been some efforts there as well, you know, because they can put these games on the global Roblox even before they're ready to go for the domestic until they start pushing the domestic market.
got it.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how much data exists out there with respect to monetization of Chinese games, but from my own personal experience, I've seen games that monetized like converted like let's say 1% in the West, but then over
It's
10% in
insane.
China. And where the ARPU, even compared to the West, right? Like our perspective is typically that Chinese are not as wealthy as Americans, but then we also saw ARPU that was like over 2x of the US. And so I do think because of however the culture is structured differently, and it's just more culturally acceptable, or however you want to think about it, it's that potential for China is tremendous. So for me, if we're saying that from an age demographic perspective, if over 13 is difficult, and if we're saying China's difficult, then I have problems considering how Roblox can justify its valuation, except for this third axis. And maybe I'll turn this over to you, Matthew, because I know you have a specific thesis around Roblox and the metaverse. And so maybe we could hear
Okay,
from you on that.
big acid hit, everyone, because we're going to go really deep in the metaverse here, and that's the only way you can do this without losing your mind.
I don't even
Um,
need it. I live in the metaverse.
so I did some TAM analysis of the metaverse because you know it's kind of hunky dory and it's kind of like take your pick of what actually counts as metaverse. So when I think of the metaverse, I think about it basically in four key verticals. It's the core gaming, software services, and advertising business that we know and love. It's the live entertainment opportunities, like we mentioned, concerts. I have sporting events in there, and I also have film cinema. It's social media advertising because if you're going to be the next generation of social networks, you're going to get a share of that advertising. And then it's the hardware too, because I don't think you can leave out the hardware side of it as well, gaming, AR, and VR hardware. And so when you put all of that together, you're looking at a TAM that reaches just about 800 billion in 2024 versus about 475 billion in 2020. Now, obviously, all of that is in existing businesses, but that's kind of the TAM that you're going after when you bring all of these pieces together and start crafting the metaverse. And so, just from a high level, there's a huge market opportunity just to build into and to take share from incumbents. This is why I think Facebook is investing. They just acquired a company called Unit 2 Games, which has a similar to Roblox platform called Creta. You take that and you say they also have 20% of their employees working on Oculus. They clearly see that there's something to this and they want to be the de facto platform for the metaverse. I think that's where they're going. You know, but when you start to put all this together, right now Roblox is the leader in this space. I think they can defend it just because they're so much further ahead than most others, except for maybe Facebook and Epic Games. And even if there's three companies that take the lion's share of this market, that's still a lot of revenue potential for Roblox down the road. And so, although I think there's some risks to kind of what's been driving growth in the recent past, there's uncertainty around China. I think these longer term opportunities, particularly in live entertainment, if we talk about the concerts business, right, and this is why Live Nation has done so successfully, as we've shifted to a streaming world, 99% of musicians don't make money from music anymore. Unless you're Taylor Swift, you don't make money from actually people listening to your music. You make money from concerts. So if you're going to go on a tour of the US and do 30 shows in 60 days and be away from your family and drive your body to physical fatigue because you're on the road doing a show every other day, you'll make whatever amount of money. Or you could do a show on Roblox and you could charge $10 and get 15 million people to watch it, right? Or on Fortnite, and plus you get a share of the cosmetic sales alongside that, and you can do it from your couch or you can do it from a studio in your hometown. That's a huge value proposition for artists. And so I think as the platforms build out and as they can support these types of things more broadly, that's a huge opportunity.
Right. I recently interviewed a game studio CEO who was working on a crypto game, and I thought a very interesting way in which he characterized the metaverse is that the metaverse to him was just a GUI, a graphical user interface to any transactional thing that could exist in the real world or virtually, right? And so to the extent that if this is a big if, and to be honest with you, I'm still skeptical of the actual kind of implementation execution of metaverse. But to your point before, Matthew, I completely agree that to the extent that Roblox can execute against that, whatever it is, it's a huge market if they can do it. But then there's all that execution and potential market risk of whatever that winds up turning out to be.
And when the valuation is as rich as it is relative to just gaming peers, there's not a lot of room to mess up your execution. And that kind of ties back to what I said at the top, right? It's that as long as they demonstrate that they are the leaders in this space and they can execute towards that vision, the growth stays strong and they can build out the live entertainment, the sports, all these things that we think the metaverse can be, the valuation can hold up. But if any of those things start to slip, I think that's when people start to reassess it.
Let me ask you this. What if growth is not as meteoric as everybody's thinking about in terms of just like DAO MAO, usership, but it becomes so much more dense that monetization continues to grow really healthily? Does that become a less interesting or more interesting opportunity, or is it just kind of like the same?
That's less interesting, right? Because you guys know you make games, right? Or, you work in games. I just watch, but and play. But over time, the ARPU tends to go up for pretty much every cohort of user base, right? As you get them to stick, right? I mean, for a good game, the ARPU goes up over time. So if you're not growing your DAOs anymore, you're only reliant on APU growth for top line growth. Whereas if you're growing DAOs and you're growing APU, you have compounding effects because the APU of the cohorts that you're retaining is going to keep going up and up over time while you're adding more and more users. And so, once you start becoming a pure APU company, that becomes actually worrisome from a valuation perspective.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm more worried about, for example, let's say this vision of the metaverse is correct, then how long does it take for them to monetize against it, right? And so I think there is, even if it works, I think there's this gap. We've already seen declines now from April to May. And if we start to see kind of a plateauing or leveling off, and then to where the metaverse takes off, there's going to be this gap in which I think the valuation that they've currently afforded is going to get pretty challenged. And I think the other thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, and probably because Dave Baszucki is so focused on the metaverse and that's all he's been talking about, but I actually also think that they've got some other growth drivers that a lot of people don't talk about. So for example, when we first talked about the Roblox business, we talked about the 3 component parts. They also have the ads business, which they didn't mention, but one of those, the cloud infrastructure. That reason why a lot of the younger developers are using it, in my opinion, it's like, why not externalize the Roblox cloud infrastructure and enable it to work with Unity and work with Unreal Engine? I think that's something they could do. Now, I don't think they are going to, because again, they're laser focused on whatever this metaverse concept is. And I also think that what would be super crazy, but super interesting, and if they were going to do it, I would insta buy Roblox stock, would be if they were to integrate crypto, like a third generation blockchain, like a Solana or a Terra, because they've got so many developers, they've got so many transactions. I mean, they could create like a real functioning crypto economy today, right? I think that would massively drive their valuation, just because of the potential for Roblox to actually create like a real economy and ecosystem for for crypto and blockchain currency, like right now.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they're going
No,
to do
I
that.
don't think so either.
But yeah, I would be I'd be a shareholder if they were. Anyway, all right. So then maybe now shifting to key risks. And Matthew, you mentioned Epic, you mentioned Minecraft, just Microsoft. Probably also fair to mention Manticore, which is kind of Manticore slash.
I think Epic's going to buy Manticore.
Their startup.
Like the writing's on
I
the
think
wall.
so.
They were
think
not the
so.
lead, but they were one of the big investors in the latest round for Manticore. And
Right.
Facebook, I mean, Fortnite creative mode hasn't really taken off to the degree that I think they wanted it to. And Manticore's already built on Unreal Engine, right?
Right.
So like, just makes too much sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a natural fit.
And Facebook.
But let's talk about key risks, starting with competition. So Matthew, what is your view? Now, you called Roblox the leader, but do you think that they face competition from, well, you also mentioned Facebook. Like who is their biggest
I mean, it's still
competition?
Fortnite and Minecraft, but I think I'm most worried about Facebook, actually, just because now that they've bought Unit 2, which is basically the client-facing platform for this type of UGC experience, they already have 2.4 billion monthly active users, over a billion DAU, right? That's a lot more than Roblox has, right? And so their ability to scale this type of thing across their platforms, WhatsApp, Insta, Facebook, etc., plus the demographic reach of their user base, if they do it aggressively and fast enough, takes away the ability for Roblox to monetize those older players. I think that's the biggest competition for Roblox right now that I see. I think Epic is going to be there. Fortnite is a beast, and if and when they acquire Manticore, which I do think will happen, that gives them that UGC piece as well. And if you kind of think about the core assets of metaverse, UGC is a big part of that to have. It's kind of like it's a big part of the client facing aspect of it. And then I won't count out Microsoft with Minecraft ever, because Minecraft is still huge. I just don't really know if they're ready to take the next step from Minecraft the game to Minecraft the metaverse, because they kind of just haven't talked about it.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
and I actually did interview a tech evangelist from Epic a couple of weeks ago, and as part of that interview, he did mention that all Tim Sweeney is orienting Epic around now is everything leads down the path to the metaverse. All the initiatives go down that pathway. So yeah, I mean, they'll definitely be there now, and so it'll just be a matter of who can execute it, right? But I also do think that Facebook also represents a different usage pattern, right? Which is like, against Minecraft, against Fortnite, it's kind of like this client base. You go into this game or this portal type thing and you kind of play, whereas Facebook is basically thinking Ready Player One. You get your VR AR headset on and you just basically
and
into a different world.
I was just gonna say, and they have 20% of their employees working on Oculus, so they clearly have something more in mind than Beat Saber when it comes to the future of VR. And so that's just important to keep in mind if you're thinking about where Facebook is going. And they missed the move to mobile. They'll admit that historically, and they lost the ability to be the walled garden, right? That became Apple and Google. And so I think a lot of these platforms are looking at the future and saying, what's the next big platform, and can I be the walled garden there? That's why you're seeing every tech company talking about electric vehicles, and I think metaverse too, because I think these are some of the big burgeoning platforms that if you can be the first mover and gain leadership, you can be the walled garden and you can get all the economic advantages that come with that.
Yeah. So in my opinion, if I were Roblox, I wouldn't worry too much about either Epic or Microsoft in this space. And the reason why is very simple. Both of them compete with their developer bases. And they're never going to stop, right? Because those are incredibly lucrative businesses. And so they're a victim of their own success, right? Fortnite will always be the biggest game on the Fortnite platform or whatever Manticore ends up being, right? And same thing with Minecraft. So I think that those are nice businesses, obviously, really nice businesses. But are they going to be the metaverse? I don't think so. In my opinion, Facebook is very interesting. Oculus has gotten to a point where, in my opinion, it is good enough to be mass market. I think the Quest 2 is a compelling experience at $300. I have one. I don't use it that often because there's not that much to do in it yet. But they are hiring against it like crazy and pushing all the chips into the table. They want to own this platform. You're totally right. And I think they've got a great chance of doing it. Now, from there, how does that connect to the metaverse? I don't know, right? I think in terms of market penetration, VR is still years away from being where it needs to be in order to, again, attract the critical mass of developers to create the experiences that you need functionally to aggregate demand and get the flywheel going, right? They have the resources to do it. They have a lot of money, but I don't think they understand games at all. Never have. So they can't start there, right? It's like, well, where are they going to start? Social media?
I would also point out, not to say that Unity is going to compete on the client-facing side, but from all of the back-end tools, Unity is a huge player in the space as well, and it's important not to leave them out as well. And if you think that they're not focused on metaverse, one of their most recent executive hires was Peter Moore, who formerly was the head of competitive gaming at Electronic Arts, but most recently was the CEO of Liverpool FC. He'll never walk alone, up the Reds. So he's being tasked with building out their live sports business, bringing live sports into the 3D virtual realm. And so I think Unity has their own, take on how the metaverse is going to shape. And even though they may not be building the client-facing side of it, they can be building a lot of the back-end tools and potentially even like a white label offering that they could give to like the Champions League, for football, soccer.
And that was the opportunity that that Macro was talking about earlier.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So in terms of like other risks, I guess in terms of demographics, it'd probably just be the ability to attract professional developers. I think they're still running up against that issue now. And geographically, we already talked about China, but I also think you have to watch the geopolitical risk as well, because that just may further complicate issues and it seems like it's almost, in my opinion, almost inevitable that there's going to be more rifts between China and the US. So we'll see what happens there. And as far as I know, I think China also does have a local competitor, right? I think I read about some Roblox-like competitors.
There's a couple. There's a lot of clones of everything in China.
All right. So given all of that, future prospects, what do you guys think? How is Roblox going to do long term? Is it worthy of its valuation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve, you want to kick us off on this?
I believe it is. I bought right after the IPO, so I'm happy with where things are right now. Obviously, not happy at the 10% drop or whatever it was the other day. I think that stuff is mostly transitory. To be honest with you, I think this is an opportunity that will become more evident over the next 5 to 10 years. I saw enough just playing with my 3-year-old son during the pandemic to be like, oh, when these guys go public, I'm all over this. And I'm just going to buy it. I'm going to hold it. And, it seems like they already have the positive feedback loop going. And when you have the positive feedback loop going and you're ahead, I'm not saying it's like there's not risks involved, executional risks, other types of risks. It's just a much safer bet than it would otherwise be. And so, Yeah, I'm long Roblox, and I have considered buying more at present valuation of what is it, $80? Yeah, 86. All right, yeah.
86,
So I
something like
bought at
that.
73, and it doesn't seem like a horrible idea.
Or
Yeah, it doesn't seem
81.
like a
It's
horrible
81.
idea
Sorry,
to
81.
buy at 81 to me. But that's just me.
The back half of the year is going to be very tough for them between reopening, schools going back full time. Can't understate that. And, you know, I believe in this long term, but can there be volatility in the next 6 months? Yes, around the numbers they're going to post every month, and people are going to react to that just like they did with the May numbers, because it is a recent IPO. There's a lot of expectations built into the valuation, and so it's going to be very sensitive to those numbers. But I think once you start moving beyond that and looking at 21, I think 21 is going to be very strong. I think 22 is going to be very strong. I think you'll also start to see, you know, a lot of these things in the live entertainment space become more material starting in 22. I think in the next 1 to 3 years is when they really start to accelerate. And so I think when you start to, you know, comps ease in 22 and these new initiatives really start to take off. And we didn't talk about the subscriptions that they're rolling out, but I think that's also something that's becoming a bigger part of the Roblox story to help drive monetization. So I think when you start tying those all together, 22 starts to look really good. And I think if the stock does sell off a little bit between now and the end of 21, you know, I think there's a lot to be encouraging entering next year to look to as kind of, you know, to be for encouragement. I'm running out of synonyms for that word.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just think they're gonna be challenged. Like, I'm not gonna buy just because. And by the way, I love the product. I love all the people I've met there. But Matthew, to the points you made, I also think that growth is gonna kind of stall out. I think average booking per DAO may continue to actually decline as, you know, there's other forms of entertainment that kind of come online later this year and things like that. I do think, though, that I would hope that they can capitalize on near-term opportunities. So for me, I do think that while the metaverse, you know, huge call option there, but it might be further out. So whether they could do something like a kids educational subscription, which I think could potentially do really well depending on the content they're able to develop, or if they were to do some of the other things that I mentioned, right? Like trying to monetize against their cloud infrastructure technology externally, or if they did something in crypto. Man, would I love to know about that. And I would buy right now. Right. So anyway, so those are my thoughts. Any final thoughts or kind of parting advice?
Bloomberg professional subscribers can read all of my research on Roblox, the metaverse, and the whole gaming sector on BI Go on your terminal.
Yep. Nothing awesome. For me. I hope one day to be able to afford professional Bloomberg subscription.
Well, maybe
Roblox will be the stock. Yeah.
And maybe Super Stonk Bros 113, 100 episodes from now, you'll be successful enough investing that you can afford your own Bloomberg terminal.
Couple cycles.
There we go. All right, guys. Well, that's it for Super Stonk Brothers number 13. Thank you, Steve and Matthew. Until next time, catch y'all later. Bye.